silly me. Here I was thinking that I was the one saving you, and in reality, you're the one saving me.
Hi, dog people. Welcome back to Rescued by a Dog, the podcast about dogs who have actually saved their owners' lives. Today, Jacqueline is going to tell us a story about a pug she rescued from a euthanasia list, and then he actually rescued her back. Today's episode is sponsored by a donor in honor of Lily and Roxy, pets she has loved and still loves, but are no longer here. And also in honor of NYC Second Chance Dog Rescue, which rescues and rehabilitates critically injured and neglected dogs and cats. This is a perfect sponsor for today's absolutely beautiful story, which is bound to give you all the feels. Hi, it's Jacqueline, right?
Correct, yes.
Nice to meet you, Jacqueline.
Likewise.
Why don't you start by telling me who was your dog that we're going to talk about today?
Sure. So my dog's name was Puglas Daniel, Johnson to be exact, Puglas Daniel Johnson Hernandez, when he was in trouble, but he most often was referred to as Pug. And as you can guess, he was a pug. We were very original with his name. And yeah, is quite literally the love of my life. And I have 2 children, so that's that's saying a lot.
We won't let them hear this. Where did you find Puglas?
So at the time, my hometown, Laredo, Texas, border town, I had just graduated college. I was in a really dark place. My whole life, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, which was veterinary medicine. And I didn't get in. And I was like, now what? I felt like a failure. I felt like I couldn't make the change in the world that I wanted to make because I couldn't be a vet. And so I went back into the animal welfare industry, which of course, even then, burnout is real. And I was feeling a lot of that too. And I was volunteering, interning at that shelter, Laredo Animal Protective Society. They are still around, and they were a private shelter that was contracted by a municipal. So thousands of dogs and cats all the time. And it just so happened that an animal control officer showed up with Puglas and said, hey, I need you to sign off on euthanasia for this dog. And I was like, okay, well, what's going on? And he was like, this dog, a Good Samaritan called. They said that he couldn't walk and he was in this laundry basket. And I was like, well, let's go look at him, check him out, and make sure, if he does need to be humanely euthanized, we'll go ahead and start that process. And so he opened his ACO truck, and there was in this little laundry basket peeking 2 big brown eyes, atypical pug. And so I pull the blanket because he was being covered. I pulled the blanket up and I see these eyes and his tail's wagging. And I was like, well, he doesn't seem too much in distress. So carefully take him out of the basket and he starts to try to walk. Unfortunately, he was hit by a car. So he couldn't use his back legs at the time. This was back in 2008. So we weren't really, that specific shelter was not really known for saving lives. Not that they didn't want to, it just was not something that they had the means for, both budget and just all the things that come with saving animals. Their euthanasia rate was like 90% back then. And just because, all the reasons, right? So lack of budget, lack of education within the community, lack of resources. So I'm proud to say that they're much improved and they are now no kill. And I think part of it is because of dogs like Puglas. So when he came into the shelter, the director at the time, her name was Lori. I went to her and I said, hey, there's this pug. And she kind of looked at me and she's like, yeah. And I said, the animal control officer wants me to sign off on euthanasia, but I'd really love to take him on. And so she kind of sat there and thought, on paper, I'm the worst adopter at the time. So I'm straight out of college. I have maybe $20, can't even afford the adoption fee. Don't have a job because I'm interning at this shelter. And so, yeah, on paper, I have no right to be adopting a medical case. But she tried to talk me out of it at first. And she said, this is a really big financial responsibility. We can't guarantee his health, all that stuff. And I was like, there's just something about this dog I need to try. And so she said, fine, if you can figure out a way to pay for his vet care, then you can have him, you can adopt him. So that same day I went to the vet clinic and I said, I have no money. I have this dog. Please let me like work for you. I will clean kennels, whatever. And so luckily I had been working with the vet prior because she was helping me with some shelter animals I was fostering. So she knew my word was true. And she agreed. So I ran back to the shelter and I said, this Dr. Kramer, she is going to let me work for her and I can pay off the vet bill. And so that was that. That's it. That's the story. um, so I took him home, and my parents were like, what the heck? Why did you bring home this non-mobile animal? Luckily, this was not my parents' first rodeo with me bringing home a stray. I've done it quite literally my whole life. I always joke and tell people that I meet that I thought it was totally normal to have 10 dogs running around your house. It wasn't until my first sleepover that they didn't have a pet that I was like, hey, mom, can you come pick me up? This is kind of weird. So I thought that that was normal. So luckily it wasn't too big of a surprise for them. So I talked to them and I let them know, like, this is my new project dog. Hopefully I could rehab him and who knows, right? So I took him to the vet. He got a full workup. He ended up having Ehrlichia and anaplasmosis,
Oh,
both tick-borne diseases. So they can cause paralysis. They can cause, of course, as you can imagine, anemia, and a couple of other underlying issues. The good news is that it's very preventable, and B, easy to treat for the most part if it's caught early enough. And he also had heartworms, so like he checked all the boxes for medical bills. So as you can imagine, we instantly started him on doxy to both help with the anaplasmosis and Ehrlichia, but also get him started with his heartworm treatment. So the first day I brought him home, I explained to my parents what I was doing. They told me I was crazy, but whatever. He, for a dog that could not use his back legs, he was just romping around. He was sniffing everything. And my parents have like this big, not a French door, but like a sliding glass door, and that leads to the outside. And he was just so excited to see a backyard. So I let him out. I helped him, carried him out. And he just laid in the grass for like a good 20 minutes. It was like the most peaceful thing. And I think that's when I was like, you're safe, buddy. you know? I, in that moment, realized what the gravity of commitment that I put on. I'm taking on this medical dog that can't walk, that has heartworms, that has Ehrlichia, that has anaplasmosis, and I've only known him an hour, but I love him. um, Now, I always joke that even to my husband, I would be like, find you a man that looks at you the way Puglas looks at me, because there was just something about the way he looked at me. And he has these big, beautiful brown eyes, so like it's hard to miss. Where the shelter is in comparison to like where the border meets is he could have very well, we joked often about him being from Mexico, because he also spoke Spanish. So that was one of the things when I first started meeting him. Luckily for me and the rest of my family, we're bilingual. We speak Spanish. It was my first language as well. So when it came time to like speaking to him, it would take him a minute to understand what I asked him to do in English. But if I told it to him in Spanish, he was like on it. So I was like, oh, you're bilingual too. And so, we go through all this medical. I remember the first day he got up and walked, which was something that I was told probably wouldn't happen, because I couldn't afford the intense specialty surgery. He had a broken femur and a broken pelvis. So we did like this makeshift cast out of like bubble wrap at first until I could afford to get him a full casting. Fast forward a little bit. He can walk now. He's heartworm negative, clear of anaplasmosis and Ehrlichia. So we can start doing regular dog things. And so I went out to a demo for Therapy Dogs Incorporated, and they were like, this is what it's like to be a therapy dog handler. This is what is required of your dog. And I was like, Pug meets all those things. He loves people. He loves kids. Let's go for it. So it took about 6 months. He passed with flying colors, which I knew he would. I was just nervous about one part, which was he had to walk across the room without touching any treats. And like I said, he was very food motivated. And so I was a little nervous about that, but he was a rock star. Um, and so we passed the test and we started doing therapy dog work. And we did that pretty much until the last year of his life. He loved it so much. It was like his favorite thing. He loved kids, and I did not have kids up until the last year that he was with us. So anytime I could get him that attention with children, he forgot all about me and he was like, I'm going to hang out with these little kids. He knew when someone needed just a good, big, goofy dog. Well, he wasn't big. In his heart, I think he was big. But he loved therapy dog work so much. I think that's when he was the happiest. Um, and then somewhere in between there, I have fibromyalgia as well as chronic migraines, as well as um, uh, type 2 diabetes. So all the things, right? And so at the time, this is 2010. So about 2 years after I adopted him, I was talking to a dog trainer and I said, I think I would really benefit from a service dog. Specifically, what I was looking for was for a dog that could alert me for my migraines because it's very dangerous to drive with a migraine, especially if they're those migraines that are coming off. They would affect like auras, so therefore affecting my vision. And so driving with a migraine is not something that I advise. And so, I was talking to a trainer and we went over like my lifestyle. I'm not necessarily a super active person in the sense that I'm going to wake up and do a 10-mile hike. I would never. If I did, take me to the doctor. There's something wrong. Yeah, I'm more of a like, let's Netflix and binge watch something, right? But I wanted to definitely stay healthy, as well as just have someone that would match my lifestyle. And so we were talking about different breeds of dogs, your atypical service dog, a golden retriever, your Labrador, especially for scent work, because both the migraines and the diabetes it's a scent that a dog could pick up on if trained properly. And so she came over, and because I had a prospect, so a potential dog that I was working with, I was actually fostering for San Antonio, or not San Antonio Pets Life, for Animal Care Services at the time. And I said, he's very well mannered, and I taught him all these tricks. But the bond is really important when working with a service dog. So I had invited her over to kind of check us out, if you will, and see how we connected, if she thought we were a good match. And so she she just kind of sat there, observed. We were having conversation, and she noticed Puglas would kind of like, so if my hand was hanging out, on the chair, Puglas would kind of just like tap it with his nose, and he would walk away, and then he'd come back and do it again. And so after a while, she asked me, she was like, "Hey, do you have like a headache, or what's like, are you feeling okay?" And I was like, I mean, I'm kind of anxious, I'm really worried about not finding a good prospect. And she was like, okay. And we just kind of kept conversing. And then it turned out about 15 to 20 minutes later, I started getting a migraine. And she was like, I know this is going to sound crazy. She's like, but I have an idea. And I was like, okay. She's like, what about Puglas? And I was like, I stayed quiet. I literally looked at her like, he's a pug. you know, the one thing they're known for is not having good scent, right? They're smushed face. They don't smell well. And she was like, I don't think it's about smell. I think it's just that he's so bonded with you. He knows he can sense something. And that, for me, especially because I wanted to make sure I was doing all the appropriate things for finding the right service dog, was out of this world. I was like, you're crazy. This is never going to work. And she's like, well, I'd like to try it. And so I was like, okay, you're going to look crazy trying to train a service dog as a pug as a service dog. But okay, let's try it. And she's like, just trust me. And I was like, okay. So, she started picking up on some of his cues that he was just naturally doing for me. I always thought he just wanted attention and cuddles, right? He was like, oh, I miss you. I'm going to come back. But she was like, I think those are his natural cues for you. So we started working on that, and it turned out that was the case, is that could sense, somehow he could sense that I was going to get a migraine. And I think only a handful of times did he ever really miss a migraine of mine. And usually there was something in the way. So either he didn't feel well, or maybe, obviously if I was away for a trip or something like that, and he, for whatever reason, wasn't with me. I had medication that I could take about 15 minutes prior to a migraine to help me kind of dumb it down, if you will, or make it less intense. So I would do that. If I was outdoors, I would move indoors, so less, dimmer lighting. And if I was driving, I would just kind of pick a store that we could go to and hang out. Whether that was like a coffee shop or something. We ended up teaching him how to. I would always carry like a backpack or a purse that was turned into a backpack, and so he learned how to dig out my EpiPen, because I do have allergic reactions sometimes, and my glucometer, which was in a little pouch that had like a carabiner, so he could take it out easily. From 2010 till 2020, he was with me all day, every day. He would come to work with me. He would go to the potty with me. I mean, he was quite literally my shadow, or I should say I was his. But and so, that's kind of when I had my aha moment. I was like, silly me. Here I was thinking that I was the one saving you. And in reality, you're the one saving me. I worked at a animal shelter's vet clinic, so very chaotic, constant. But he was perfect, I'm telling you. I know people say that all the time, but I could leave him in his sit stay spot for hours, and he wouldn't. He'd sleep, he'd hang, he just watched everyone. He was really great. He never he never was not where I told him to be unless something was wrong. And so if he ever did start to act unsettled, he would like do these quiet little barks, and then get louder as I progressed. The staff would be like, "Hey Jackie, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." They're like, "Hey, Pug's alerting us." And so I'd go sit down and check my blood sugar, or maybe make sure that like I'm not getting a headache and I'm ignoring it, because in the veterinary / animal sheltering field, it's very easy to do that. He was known to throw parties. He had a birthday party every year. He would invite his dog friends and his people friends, and his shelter friends. Sometimes, I think twice, we had it at an animal shelter where they had a dog park. And so some of the shelter dogs were invited to have dog cake and presents with him. And he was notorious for having Whataburger. He loved Whataburger French fries. Those were his favorite. And so much so that Whataburger actually, before like knowing that you could go viral, he went viral. So when you type in his name, Puglas the Pug, you'll see a picture of him on the bed with his Whataburger. um, so fast forward to he's around like 10 at this time, and he's starting to slow down like dogs do. And so I had made the ultimate decision to retire him because his little body can't keep up. And so I addressed the staff at the time. I was like, just so you guys know, I'm going to start retiring Puglas. I think they were more devastated than I was. There were some tears, definitely. They were like, what are we going to do without Puglas? He touched every life he met. And I think that's really important. My parents, I remember we had the conversation when I decided to retire him. They were really worried. They were like, what are we gonna do? He's getting older. And they were fearful that I would have this like huge downfall. And part of me wondered that too. I was like, how am I supposed to live without this dog? Because he was so much more than a dog. He was my lifeline, both in a service dog aspect, but in a personal aspect. I mean, he was with me through marriage, divorce, you name it. We went through it. We moved to so many different cities and states, met so many different people, and he was with me in a time of my life where I was discovering myself. The year he passed was the year I had my daughter. And the one thing I had promised him was that I would have a kid because he loved kids so much. So I remember I had my daughter August of 2020, and this was November 2020. This is the last day I saw Puglas. I remember I was in my room. I had just put the baby down for a nap, and I heard little clip clap, and because he hated getting his nails trimmed like most pugs do. And so I heard him, and I looked over because I was lying down in bed, and I look over at him, and he came over around the bed, and he looked at me, and I was like, "Hey Pug, how are you?" He was just kind of looking around the room, and he checked the baby because she was in her bassinet. He kind of looked at her, And he looked back at me and he walked out of the room. And I was like, okay, see ya. And I took a nap, and my husband came into the room and he woke me up from the nap. He was like, hey, I'm so sorry, but Puglas passed away. He had let him outside, and he took a nap under the tree. And he's not awake. So I got up and I went to confirm it. He had, in fact, passed. But I think even at his final moments, he wanted to make sure that we were okay. And when I think back, I had that conversation with my parents about what am I going to do? He had medical problems, as an older geriatric pug does. So we knew that it would eventually come. So in my head, I thought I was going to have to make that decision. And like I said, even through at the end, I think he knew. He said, if I had to guess, I think that was his biggest, not sacrifice, but his biggest, I love you. I don't want you to make this decision for me. And he went exactly how I would want, peacefully outside by the tree. And he got to meet my daughter, who loved him so much. I have one picture of them together, but it's like the most perfect picture because it's the day we brought her home and he got to meet her and his tail's wagging, and it's just so perfect.
Do you think he waited for you to have a child so that this story is really touching me, so that you would have someone somewhere else to put your love?
100%. I remember I called my parents and I let them know. And they paused when I told them because, as you can imagine, that's when they feared I would go into like a deep depression. But I had to focus on my daughter, and she was a newborn still, still pretty fresh. And so I dedicated so much time to her. Part of me thinks that he's a genius. So of course, I think it was very well planned. And it was at such a precise time in my life. Like, it's exactly what I needed. If it would have happened any time sooner or any time after, I think I would have been even more of a mess than I was, when it did happen. I was surrounded by family because some of my family was visiting. I remember my sister was in town. So I think that also he was like, okay, this is her other support systems here. Like, now is a good time. He passed away at the wonderful age of 13. But man, the whole time that we lived together, every day was just better than the next. They talk about when someone passes that you lose someone. And I feel like I miss him every day, of course, but his memory will forever be with me. And so often we talk about, my friends and I were like, man, today I thought of Puglas and I donated $5. Or I went to Whataburger and I thought of Puglas, so I paid it forward. And I think that's the most beautiful thing. He was such a great dog. Sorry. He was such a great dog, and it's such a great feeling to know that he impacted so many people. And he still does. Every now and then I'll post like thinking of Pug today, and so many people will comment and be like, yeah, me too. And to think that I think at his best, he was like 23 pounds. To think that a 23-pound dog could touch so many lives. I think back to all those kids that we did therapy work with, all the people we went to retirement home for that didn't have anyone else but Puglas. So I think when I think back to me s- foolishly thinking that I was saving a dog, in reality, he wasn't just saving my life, he was saving so many other people's lives. Um, One of the most important things is what would Puglas have wanted me to do? And that's something that I constantly think of. I use that line almost every day, throughout my time with Puglas. I was like, there would be days where I'm like, it's not worth it. I'm just going to lay here forever. And here would come this 23-pound dog to remind me that not only did he need to go potty, but he wanted to go smell the roses, or play with a toy, or he needed me just as much as I needed him. And so luckily for me, having Puglas, he definitely taught me that I didn't have to be a veterinarian to try and change the world. And thanks to Puglas, I was able to meet so many people and so many just do like fundraisers and just all these other things that I never thought were possible unless I was someone. And I was Pug's mom. People knew me as Puglas's mom. And so one year he got invited to South by Southwest by some rapper. And he was like, hey, we want to hang out with your dog. We saw him on Instagram. And I was like, what? So we got invited to South by Southwest. I can't remember his name because it's not necessarily my genre, but man, I remember that year was pretty cool. And I texted my friends and I was like, yeah, Pug's going to go hang out with some rappers at South by Southwest. So it was like, and to this day, I will forever and always be Puglas's mom. So we would joke that he was a lazy pug because, most pugs have that cinnamon roll tail. His only looped once. It kind of looked like almost like a sad orca. And so we would always joke that he had a lazy tail, but because of that, he could actually catch it, which I don't think any other pugs could. So every now and then when he was in that goofy, like, I want to love you and show you that I'm loved mode, he would chase his tail and catch it for me. So I just loved that about his lazy tail.
If Puglas could understand human English, what would you like to say to him?
Oh man, I think that I would just tell him I love him. I tell him I love him even now. He's so special. Some people think that a heart dog is something made up. It's like this mythical thing that we make up, but if we know when you have that heart dog,